This one's tough. This one's very tough. It's going to be very science heavy. But I want to stress at the beginning here that, remember, our task is not to that deeply understand the science, right? And so if you feel like you're rereading a lot with these passages, you're putting your focus in the wrong place. The focus should be the choices. And so our overall strategy is to just narrow your focus as much as possible. If the lines are long and confusing, you really want to put your focus in the smaller choices and even smaller words that come in those choices. So let's start by also using the fact that this is a no-line reference question, and how would we handle that? So if we're running out of time, this is going to be tough, right? Because we don't want to have to reread everything and look for this answer. But it is asking for something specific. When compared to mental athletes, the individuals in the control group in McGuire's second study. So they're very specifically asking for something here. So what I would do is I'd look around question 49 and see what are my line references. So 49 is right here. 48 was telling me to look at the fifth paragraph, 57 to 65. Question 50 doesn't help because it's got no line reference, but it's paired with 51. And this has got a long range of lines, and I don't know the answer yet. I wouldn't do this question just for the sake of knowing what the right answer is. I would just kind of look quickly at those lines and be like, well, it's kind of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So number 49 is probably somewhere between 57 and 87. Right? Now that's a lot of lines. But it can help, right? I kind of included the 50s here because you might want the context. But hopefully we can kind of start to notice as we read this when we get to the right thing, because we want to use the question as well to narrow our focus, right? We want to read with purpose. We don't want to just try to read and understand all these lines blindly. We want to know what we're looking for so that we can kind of turn our brain on a higher level when we know we've gotten to the right thing. So we're looking for something comparing the mental athletes to the control group. Okay, so let's start reading kind of here. But when researchers reviewed the imaging data, not a single significant structural difference turned up. The brains of the mental athletes appeared to be indistinguishable from those of the control. So athletes control, so this seems important. What's more, on every single test of general cognitive ability, the mental athlete scores came back well within the normal range. So again, the time of the athletes, the memory champs weren't smarter and they didn't have special brains. So this seems to say no difference, right? That's my dumb summary of what's going on here. But let's keep going. There was one telling difference between the brains of the mental athletes and the control subjects. So again, we're comparing. When the researchers looked at which parts of the brains were lighting up when the mental athletes were memorizing, they found that they were activating entirely different circuitry. So different circuitry is different. So, okay, different, I don't even know what that means. Circuitry. According to functional MRIs, regions of the brain that were less active in the control subjects seem to be working in overdrive for the mental athlete. So it's different regions. Okay, let's keep going. Surprisingly, when the mental athletes were learning new information, they were engaging several regions of the brain known to be involved in two specific tasks: visual memory and spatial navigation. So again, there's that idea of regions. They're specifying the regions now, including the same right posterior hippocampal region, that London cabbies had enlarged with all their daily wayfinding. At first glance, this wouldn't seem to make any sense. Why would mental athletes be conjuring images in their mind's eye when they were trying to learn three-digit numbers? Why should they be navigating like London cabbies when they're supposed to be remembering the shapes of snowflakes? Okay, so it seems like we've moved on here. I'm going to stop reading there. It seems like we've moved on. The answer is somewhere in this kind of like 50 to 70 range. So I still don't really understand the answer. If you asked it to me without any answer choices, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But that's okay, because that's not my task, right? I don't have to write an essay about it. I'm given 4 answers, and I have to test those answers with what I read. So let's see. They showed less brain activity overall. So they're talking about the control showed less brain activity overall. Well, they talk about different things lighting up, but I don't know, this seems to contradict what they said before, right? The brains of the mental athletes appear to be indistinguishable from those of the control subjects. On every single test of general cognitive ability, the mental athlete scores came back well within the normal range. The memory champs weren't smarter, and they didn't have special brains. So the control isn't less active. That's not what they're saying. And that word overall is pretty strong, right? I mean, they're not overall talking about the brain. They're really focusing on this one specific function of the brain. So this is a very strong choice. And by narrowing my focus to the individual words within the choice, I can move away from this piece here that says showed less brain activity and more towards the piece at the end, which goes against kind of what they're saying in the lines. So one word can make a difference. But let's keep going. Demonstrated a wider range of cognitive ability. Well, I just read that they scored the same on cognitive tests. So it's not a wider range. It's the same. It's normal. They said normal range, right? It's up here. Mental athletes came back well within the normal range. See, they exhibited different patterns of brain activity. Well, something was different. Different circuitry, different regions, right? So that sounds good. Let's keep going. Displayed noticeably smaller hippocampal regions. No, said the opposite, right? When the researchers read the imaging data, not a single significant structural difference turned up. So their brains looked the same structurally. So this is a structure, and it does not say it's smaller. It says that the different regions, when they talked about the regions, what did they say? They said that they were engaging different regions. The hippocampal region, right, that the London cabbies had enlarged, right? So the control is being compared here against the mental athletes, not the London cabbies. So that's a little bit of a trap. So I want to be very clear. The mental athletes are the focus of this study. And at the beginning, in line like 50-ish, they're making it clear that the mental athletes and the control have the same looking brain under the scanners. A different study from earlier did say that the taxi cab people had a larger structure. But they are not saying that here. So this is why narrowing your focus is so important, is we can start to pick apart the choices and notice the little things about, like, who are we talking about? The mental athletes, not the cabbies. So C is going to be my answer. And I do think that people pick A, they pick C, they pick D. We're all over the map on this question because the wrong answers feel very right. They kind of hit the highlights of what's being said, but they go too far. So in this case, I think the biggest thing is comparing choices A and C. Showing less brain activity overall is a very strong phrase, versus C, exhibiting different patterns of brain activity. Notice how the word different is nice and weak. We can say two things are different without ranking them. Choice A ranks them, right? One is more, one is less. C is just saying they're different. Those kinds of subtle things are very important on the SAT. And so you need to train yourself to narrow your focus to those kinds of differences, especially when you're down to two choices, right? It might be that the entire question comes down to something like this, where are we saying two things are one is better, one is worse? Or are we just saying that they're different? Weaker choices are better. C is definitely weaker, and it is supported by the lines, different patterns of brain activity. They're using different regions. It's not saying more or less, it's just saying different. And so that is justified by the lines, and I know that because I was able to use those choices and really pick them apart to better understand these very confusing lines. We're working backwards, and it's much easier.